A house divided. The night the Jacobs family arrived at the sprawling Preston estate in Shadowmere, the setting sun painted the house in fiery hues. Despite its peeling paint and cracked windows, the mansion stood majestic atop a hill overlooking the quiet town. It was a fresh start for the family. Martin, his wife Denise, their children Amelia and Ethan, and Martin's brother John. They had been skeptical when the price was revealed, less than half the value of a comparable house. But the realtor assured them it was merely because of the home's age. "With a little TLC, this place will be perfect," Martin said optimistically, patting John on the back as they carried furniture inside. John chuckled. "Yeah, and I'll try not to trip over any ghosts while we're at it." Little did they know, the house had far more than old creaks and drafts to worry about. Within days of moving in, the family began hearing whispers among the townsfolk. Passing neighbors would glance at them, muttering about the Preston estate. When Martin finally asked the mailman about it, he was met with a nervous laugh. "Y'all bought that house? Who, boy?" "Well, they say the Prestons didn't just lose everything, they lost themselves. Weird stuff happens there." Curious, Denise dove into the local library archives. The story of the Prestons was grim. In the early 1900s, Jonathan Preston had built the mansion as a monument to his wealth. But over time, the family became reclusive. Servants quit, citing strange occurrences. By the late 1920s, neighbors reported screams from the house. One by one, the Prestons were found dead, some by hanging, others from self-inflicted wounds. Local legends whispered of a dark force consuming anyone who stayed there too long. "Just old wives' tales," Martin said when Denise shared what she'd found. "This house is fine." But fine was far from the truth. The first tragedy struck during the third week. John had taken it upon himself to fix the basement. Rumors had long circulated that the foundation hid secret tunnels, but John saw only decades of grime. One night, while the rest of the family slept, John ventured down with his flashlight and toolbox. Hours passed. Denise woke to the sound of distant thudding. Thinking it was John, she crept down to the basement door. "John, you okay?" No answer. She descended the stairs, finding the room darker than it should have been. Then she saw it. John's body slumped against the wall, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was frozen in a mask of terror, eyes bulging as if he'd seen something impossible. Nearby, his flashlight lay flickering, casting grotesque shadows across the blood-smeared concrete. Carved into the wall beside him was a symbol, one Denise couldn't comprehend but instinctively feared. Grief-stricken but determined not to abandon their new home, the family decided to stay, reasoning John's death was a freak accident. Denise threw herself into repairing the upstairs bathroom, where the plumbing groaned ominously. As she worked, a cold draft swept through, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. The mirror fogged over, though there was no steam. Denise frowned, wiping it with a cloth, and froze. The reflection in the mirror wasn't hers. Instead, a pale woman with hollow eyes stared back, her mouth opening to emit a silent scream. Denise backed away, but the door slammed shut. Water began to pour from the tub, turning black and viscous as it overflowed. Denise screamed, pounding on the door, but the water surged toward her, pulling her into the tub. Her cries echoed through the house as the water swallowed her whole. When Martin finally broke the door down, he found the bathroom empty, the tub dry. Denise was gone, her tools abandoned on the floor. The house grew darker, colder, as though feeding on their despair. Martin threw himself into trying to understand the evil lurking in its walls. Late one night, he searched the attic for clues. He found a leather-bound journal belonging to Jonathan Preston, its pages filled with erratic handwriting describing rituals and summoning dark forces to protect the house. As he read, the attic door slammed shut. Shadows moved along the walls, their forms growing more defined. Figures with contorted limbs and eyeless faces. They reached for Martin, pulling him into their inky forms. When the children awoke the next morning, they found their father hanging from the attic ceiling, the journal open beneath him. His face bore the same expression of terror that John had worn. With no adults left to shield them, Amelia and Ethan tried to escape. But the house wouldn't let them. Doors locked on their own, windows shattered when approached. Amelia was the first to succumb. She began hearing voices, promising safety if she obeyed. One night, she vanished. Ethan found her the next morning in the dining room, her eyes blank and her body standing rigid like a statue. As he called her name, her lips moved, but the voice that emerged wasn't hers. "I serve now," it said, before she walked into the walls and disappeared, leaving no trace. Ethan, determined not to share his sister's fate, resisted the house's pull, but it was relentless. On his final night, he felt compelled to enter the basement. There, he saw a black void where the wall once stood. From within, Amelia's voice called out, "It's okay, Ethan. Come join me." Unable to resist, Ethan stepped forward. The void enveloped him, leaving the basement silent once more. Shadowmere's townsfolk grew curious when the family wasn't seen for weeks. The sheriff investigated, finding the house eerily quiet. In the basement, he discovered something chilling. The walls were lined with human remains, dozens of them, their faces frozen in agony. Among the skeletons were 5 fresh bodies: John, Denise, Martin, Amelia, and Ethan. Each bore signs of torment, their souls seemingly consumed by the house. The Preston estate, it seemed, had never been empty. It was alive, feeding on its inhabitants, their screams echoing through its dark halls forever. The Preston estate remains unsold to this day, a monument to Shadowmere's darkest secret.